Huh? It's 5:05 and welcome into a Friday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Well, yesterday started early in-person voting for the 2024 general election with long lines at voting locations across the state. Early voting will continue all the way through Saturday, November the 2nd. Dates, locations, and times for early voting do vary on each county. You can read more details on that on our website, carolinajournal.com. We are hoping to get, and I've got my fingers crossed that we'll get some of those early voting numbers in the 5 o'clock hour this morning. As soon as we get those before we're off the air, hopefully we can pass some of those along to you. However, we do have a few counties where we've got some anecdotal data. In Yancey County, which, as you are well aware, was incredibly hard hit by Hurricane Helene. Many folks in that area still dealing with devastation. The election director there reported a record turnout of over 600 early votes, or around 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Polls were open for a couple more hours in that county. We are waiting for those statewide totals. We'll pass them along to you as soon as we get them. It wasn't just the first day for early voting yesterday. It was also the first day for the 2024 North Carolina State Fair, as tens of thousands of individuals made it to the opening night of the fair in Raleigh yesterday. The fair runs through October the 27th. There are 70 new food items at the fair. We'll get some more details on that with Katie Zinder from the Carolina Journal coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. Online sports betting in North Carolina has been legal since earlier this year and is taxed at 18%. That places the state 11th out of 27 comparable states, according to a September Tax Foundation report. New York, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island have the highest tax rates at 51%, while Iowa and Nevada have the lowest at 6.75%. North Carolina is among 38 states that have legalized sports betting, though it exceeds its state income tax because sports betting revenue is not classified as income. In September of this year, North Carolina generated $12.6 million in tax revenue from over $70 million in gross wagering revenue. That's bets placed. Since its launch in March of this year, the state's highest earning month was April, as you can imagine, with $18.9 million in taxed revenue. That came from a total of over $105.3 million in wagers that were placed across the state. Tax revenues are allocated to the General Fund, the College Athletic Department at 13 universities, and the North Carolina Major Events, Games, and Attraction Fund. Projections suggest that the state could generate $188 million in tax revenue by the end of the fiscal year 24-25. Sports betting very much alive and well here across the state of North Carolina. It's 5:08 and you're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. With early voting kicking off in all 100 counties across North Carolina, hundreds of early voting sites are open as folks make their way to the polls. An interesting study was recently performed over at Duke University surrounding ballot order. Who appears in what order on your ballot? Joining us on the Carolina Journal News Hour this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome Professor Arletto from Duke University. Professor, thanks for the time. You guys did this study. What did you find?
Hi, Nick. Thank you for having me. So what we did in the study, we looked at a number of past judicial races that appeared on the ballot without party labels. And so what happened is that when you face a judicial race and there are no party labels, then there are two names listed on that particular ballot. And so what happened was that the rules that regulate the orders of those two names in the judicial race would vary over time. And most importantly, that rule was different from the rule that would regulate the order of partisan races, meaning the races like the presidential race in the United States or the governor race and so on and so forth. For those, the rules would regulate a ordering by party, while for the non-partisan races without party labels, it would be a regulation that was by last name or some other criteria. And so this led to the fact that the order of the parties that would show up in the ballot on the partisan races would be sometimes different from the order of the parties that would endorse the judicial candidates in the non-partisan judicial races. So if you look at the ballot, you will see all of the partisan races with party labels showing up, and then you will get to a judicial race with no party labels. And according to the rules that regulated the order of those judicial races and the fact that different parties endorse different judicial candidates, sometimes you will see that the judicial candidate endorsed by one party is in the same position as the candidates of the same party in other races, and sometimes the position is different. And so what we found is that essentially so suppose that a voter is seeing a ballot, and as you know, there are many races on our ballot in North Carolina. So suppose that you start voting and you vote for whichever party you like, and that party's candidate is always in the same position in all of the partisan races. And then you get to a judicial race in which there are no party labels, and are you going to be voting for that particular race if you don't have too much information about that race, or are you going to use some cues based on that you can gather based on the ballot? And the cues that we were looking at was the position cue. So meaning, is there a chance that somebody's going to assume that the candidate of the party that you want to vote for is in exactly the same position as the candidate of the same party in the other races on the same ballot?
So you did
Sounds
this
a bit
study.
Complicated, but
Well, no, not at all. You did this study, and I guess I'll ask you to explain further. Did this actually have an impact, as voters maybe did not know who some of these judicial candidates were? They don't get the same spotlight as president, governor, senate, some of those other races you talked about. The question, did it actually have an impact in past elections here in North Carolina?
Very good. So as you said correctly, right? So as you go down ballot, probably the amount of information that voters have about the candidates running for office diminishes. And so when you get to a race in which you know little, how are you going to vote? And some people know exactly who to vote for, and some people might skip that particular race. And so what we were interested in was to study whether there was a position bias, and we found that misled about 13% of voters to probably vote, that intend to vote by party, but that end up voting for the candidate of the opposing party. Now, this is the amount of people that would vote by let's say by mistake, meaning intend to vote for a particular party, but because of the position on the ballot, they would vote for the candidate of the opposing party. And then you were mentioning, did this have an impact? And the way that this works, while there are people that probably are going to end up voting by mistake because of how the ballot is designed, mistakes happen for both parties in the same way. And so those mistakes end up essentially canceling each other out, meaning no race would have gone the different way, but if there are about 13% on each side that vote by mistake, and the fact that those two mistakes cancel each other out is not particularly reassuring, because people should be able to vote for who they would like to vote for.
I think it's probably safe to assume those folks that live in municipalities that are used to off-cycle elections, many of those races for city council and town councils are not partisan races. You compare that to the midterm and general elections that we look like. Maybe safe to assume that some of those municipality voters maybe have more experience with this versus folks that don't live in a municipality and only vote every 2 years?
So that's an interesting question. So our research does not speak to that, in the sense that we only looked at races that happened during presidential cycles. We were worried about, putting presidential and off-presidential cycles together, because those races draw a different amount of people to the voting booth and so on and so forth. So the work we did does not speak to that, but that's something that would be interesting to test.
Now, there's been some changes in the law in North Carolina where now some of these judicial races, I'm not sure if all of them, but some of them now do have a party affiliations where they didn't in the past. Safe to assume that maybe some of what you're talking about and what your study found caused those partisan labels to be put on those judicial races?
So I think that it is true that the laws change over time, and now statewide judicial races do have party labels, and these are the races for the North Carolina Supreme Court and the North Carolina Court of Appeals. I'm not sure what motivated the legislature to change those races by adding party labels. From our perspective, that gave us the possibility to test what happens when there is a difference in the order and you add party labels, and we see that at that point, the amount of mistake that people make goes essentially away. So while the law changed, it changed in a way that party labels were added, difference in the order of parties across different contests remained, and the addition of the party labels made it so that the mistake that I was describing earlier disappeared.
Professor Arlotto from Duke University joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. 5:15 News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Time for a look at your Friday morning commute. Boomer Von Cannon's got the latest.
Hey, thank you, Nick. We're looking great. WBT.
Your emergency situation station.
Hot. It's 5:19. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Good Friday morning to you. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. We are also streaming live this morning, as we are every morning, over on our Carolina Journal YouTube channel. Well, if you were with us yesterday morning, we spent almost the entire program talking about the latest Carolina Journal poll, our final poll of the 2024 presidential cycle. And what did we show? Well, North Carolina remains a top battleground state as Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are virtually tied. That's according to our most recent poll. Trump leads Harris 47.2 to 46.6. That is well within the margin of error of the poll, and 4% of voters say they're still undecided in that contest. This tight race mirrors the Real Clear Politics average for the state, which does give Donald Trump a slight edge in North Carolina, though other polls show him with larger leads. Meanwhile, Democrat Josh Stein, the current attorney general in the state, has pulled ahead of Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson in the gubernatorial race. It's almost a 15-point margin, according to Carolina Journal. The poll also highlights the close contest in the very important key Council of State races, including Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor. Voter priorities do continue with issues like the economy and inflation, jobs, abortion, and natural disaster preparedness. Those have also emerged as a concern, particularly in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. We continue to track those details. You can read the entire poll over on our website, carolinajournal.com. And thanks to the folks that made their way to our Carolina Journal poll dinner yesterday, just east of the Charlotte area, as we head into the home stretch of the 2024 general election. Again, early voting does kick off once again, day 2 this morning across the state. And while we are still waiting for data from the North Carolina State Board of Elections, that typically gets uploaded to their website sometime in the 5 o'clock hour. From all accounts, lines 1, 2, 3 hours long at some voting locations across the state, looking to see if yesterday's first day of early voting broke records, similarly to how it broke records in places like Georgia. Early voting will continue until Saturday, November the 2nd. Now, it's important to note that dates, locations, and times for early voting do vary because each county board of elections has some level of discrepancy based on the county and the voting locations that they have. You can read a full list of early voting locations over on our website, carolinajournal.com. Tens of thousands of individuals waited to head on into the North Carolina State Fair yesterday evening. The fair runs through October the 27th. It's a relatively affordable event to attend. Tickets costing about $12 to attend, with rides and games also having different fees associated with that. There are 72 new food items at the fair this year. You can find and read more details about the fair and their entire schedule over at the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. The website ncagr.gov. That's ncagr.gov. We'll get some details on some of those brand new food items with Katie Zinder. She'll join us coming up a little bit later on this morning right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:23, News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. Day 2 of early voting kicking off across North Carolina, coming up in a couple of hours this morning. Joining us on the program this morning is Dallas Woodhouse. He is the North Carolina Director for American Majority Action. Dallas, thanks for joining us on the Carolina Journal News Hour this morning. Some record-breaking early voting numbers in the state yesterday. Tell us and give us a brief overview of early voting and why it's been such a big push this election cycle.
Well, on the conservative side, we were particularly concerned that, a lot of conservatives had shied away from early voting because of change in COVID rules and, problematic procedures in other states. So, we've been doing a big push for conservatives to either vote by mail or vote early in person. We've seen some statistics in the mail voting where if you compare the two party averages, and, we don't target by party, we sort of target by ideology, but it's the best way we know to measure it. because not near as many people are going to vote by mail in 24 as they did in 20 because of COVID. But if you compare it by party, the Democrats are down about 10 points. The Republicans are up about 18 points as far as who has requested absentee ballots by mail. That is, an 18-point differential, which is, good for the conservative cause. I think some of that is, a reset after COVID, but some of it I think is the work that, my organization's been doing for 18 months. Also, now we're into early in-person voting. I don't want to read too much into the first day because those are broken glass voters. Those are people who were going to vote. They were always going to vote. It's just a question of when they voted. Let's give it today, tomorrow, maybe Monday, and let's look at the statistics and see where we are. But there's definitely a lot of people ready to vote.
Well, no question about it. We saw earlier in the week, Georgia broke a record for their early voting on the first day that they had. That was on Wednesday. The early voting numbers in Pennsylvania look incredibly high. Talk a little bit more about why this is such a big push, specifically on the conservative side in comparison to waiting until the last minute on Election Day, which traditionally has been a big Republican turnout day for voters.
Well, and it still will be. I think, roughly 7 to 8% of voters in North Carolina will vote by mail this time, up from about 5%. I think as many, easily 55, maybe as much as 60% of voters will vote in the early in-person time frame. And, we'll have less, we'll have about a third, maybe even less of voters who vote on Election Day, and they will still mostly be Republicans. But, the thing is that all campaigns kind of work the same. Right, it's kind of a strategic issue, is that campaigns work from strength to weakness. Dan Bishop down there in the Charlotte area, his campaign will try to turn out the best voters first, and you keep working those voters until you get them out. And the sooner they go vote, they come off the list. You can go down the list, whether you're a political party, whether you're an outside group, whether you're a particular campaign, you can go down the list and get more less reliable voters. So it's really a cost thing. It's also that, look, we've just seen a hurricane come through and disrupt voting patterns. We've seen, bad storms in late October and November. And even the best voters, have situations that come up at the last minute. They get COVID. They have an accident. They have to go out of state because, grandma passed away. All kinds of things happen in the last minute. So, and when you're talking about an election, as you know, Carolina Journal poll came out. All of the races, most of the top races in North Carolina within a couple of points, every vote matters. And you don't get, at this point, you do not get votes in bunches. You don't. You get one vote at a time. And so that's really why it's important. They can go to securevotenc.com, securevotenc.com. They can see where their early voting places. They can also request an absentee mail ballot if they need to.
Dallas Woodhouse from American Majority Action joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Keeping on this thread of early voting, Dallas, the numbers in the past, over 65% of voters voted early in the 2020 presidential election. And according to the North Carolina Board of Elections, they say the number could be even higher. Where do you estimate that to be?
Hard to know. I think probably roughly 60%, because I think there are a lot of people that would consider early voters that voted by mail because of COVID that won't do it. My feeling is we're probably about, whatever the exact mix is, about a third will vote on Election Day, maybe a little less. And I think in the long run, we're going to have to make some decisions about, keeping, everybody gets so partisan and angry if you talk about changing any voting procedures. But in the long run, is it going to make sense to have 70% of our voters trying to vote, and there'll be people in line for hours yesterday, I'm sure, voting in, 70% of the voters voting in 10% of the locations, right? Eventually we're going to have to decide probably that we need fewer or larger voting things on Election Day because just so few people are going to them. But that's a discussion for another time. I mean, the thing is, with all the fussing and everything the Democrats have done, I mean, we have among the most liberalized voting rules in the country for access. But I think we've done a pretty good job with security. No system is perfect. We don't allow ballot harvesting for mail votes. We have a good check-in system for absentee ballots. We're now checking IDs for every person that votes, no matter how they vote. So I have a lot of confidence in the system, and so should conservatives and Republicans across the state.
Dallas Woodhouse joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:30, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT, and time to get another look at the roads this morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. We're looking great.
It's 5:36. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. We have got our first details coming out of the North Carolina State Board of Elections in regards to early voting. I'll note that this file just became available in a quick number crunch. It appears that over 353,000 individuals voted yesterday as part of early voting in North Carolina. In terms of the partisan breakdown of those voters, still working on crunching some of those numbers behind the scene. You can track and keep up to date with all of this information by visiting CarolinaElections.com. That's CarolinaElections.com, and you'll see the vote tracker feature on that website that keeps up to date with the latest early voting numbers, and you'll be able to track that each and every day as we get closer to the 2024 general election. A new study by researchers at Duke highlight how variable ballot designs and party labeling can mislead a significant portion of North Carolina voters. The study analyzed public data from 2004 until 2020 and found that around 13% of both Republican and Democrat voters cast unintentional votes due to flipping of candidate order and absence of party labels in certain races. One striking example of this occurred in the 2016 election. While Republican Donald Trump won the presidential race in North Carolina handedly, fellow Republican Bob Edmonds lost a key North Carolina Supreme Court race after being listed second without a party label. He trailed behind Democrat Michael Morgan, who then served on the court. The absence of party affiliation likely misled voters, resulting in Morgan's win and a shift in the court's political balance. The researchers concluded that adding party labels to all races helps ensure voters' intentions are accurately reflected. And, well, in fact, in 2017, the North Carolina General Assembly lawmakers there did require, in fact, partisan labels for all statewide judicial races. However, down-ballot races without party labels still remain vulnerable to this, quote, flip effect, which could influence the outcome in close elections. The study underscores the potential political consequences of ballot design and advocates for cleaner and more consistent labeling practices to prevent voter confusion. Now, if you went out and voted yesterday or have plans to vote in the next couple of days, you will notice that there are party labels for a vast majority of the ballots, vast majority of the races, rather, that are on your ballot. However, depending on the municipality that you live in, there could be races like school board or county commission that do not have those partisan labels next to it. Other races, including soil and water, typically don't have those party affiliations either. However, the vast majority of races do. It's a very interesting study. Jeff Moore from the Carolina Journal wrote about this. You can head on over to our website, carolinajournal.com, and read more details about that. Online sports betting in North Carolina has been legal since earlier this year and is currently taxed at 18%, placing the state 11th out of 27 comparable states. That's according to a September Tax Foundation report. New York, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island have the highest tax rates at over 51%, while Iowa and Nevada have the lowest at 6.75%. North Carolina is among 38 states that have legalized sports betting, and according to details in September of this year, North Carolina generated over $12.5 million in tax revenue. That was from over $70 million worth of wagering in the state. Since its launch in March, North Carolina has earned a total of over $105 million in terms of tax revenues. Those revenues are allocated to the general fund, the collegiate athletic department at 13 universities across the state, and the North Carolina major events, games, and attraction funds. Sports betting does continue to be very popular in North Carolina and a significant generator of revenue for the state. It's now 5:41. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. The 2024 North Carolina State Fair continues running in the state capitol this morning. Katie Zinder from the Carolina Journal joins us this morning. Katie, you were at Media Day earlier this week for the state fair. It runs until the 27th of the month. Lots of new activities, lots of new food, and lots of new things for folks to stop by and see. What did you learn earlier this week?
Right. So I was able to attend Media Day earlier this week where, it included remarks from Agriculture Commissioner Steve Troxler, as well as Department of Labor and State Fair Director Kent Overton. There's a few new things coming to the State Fair this year. The main focus of Media Day was the new foods that are going to be at the State Fair this year. The idea behind Media Day is an opportunity for the media to get a first taste at some of these new foods, and we're actually able to vote on them in two separate categories and then choose our favorite foods out of those new foods. So there's going to be over 70 new foods at the State Fair this year. Over 30 of those foods were at Media Day, and I was able to try quite a few of them. So the media is able to vote on their favorites in two categories, sweet and savory. So the winner in the sweet category this year was Magdalena's Chimney Cakes. She was at the fair last year as well. I had a chance to speak with her and try her chimney cakes. Basically, her winner this year in the sweet category was something called the Granny Cone, which is basically kind of an ice cream cone, but instead of it in a traditional cone, it's in a Hungarian pastry, which is like a sweet dough that's kind of baked rotisserie style over an open flame. And that is filled with maple bacon ice cream, sprinkled with cornflakes, and topped with whipped cream. I was able to try that, and that is quite good. And then the winner in the savory category, I didn't try this one myself, but it's the Jerk Pork Belly Bayo by Cool Runnings Jamaican, which I believe is based out of Texas, and it's a tender, slow-cooked jerk pork belly in a fluffy bayo, including a zesty vegetable mix. And then a few of my other favorites were the Monster Tots, which are basically large tater tots. These are 3 times the size of an average tater tot, and they are either stuffed with buffalo chicken, bacon, or bacon cheddar and chives. These are from the Hot Cakes and Chicken, which is a food truck based here in Raleigh. And so they are going to take several of these giant tater tots and put them on like a skewer stick. So that was one of my favorites, as well as the bacon cheeseburger corn dog. These are brought to us by a vendor called the Pioneer Wagon. These people are based out of Iowa, and they told me that they come all the way down here because this is one of the best state fairs in the country. And that is something that we have heard repeatedly, is that North Carolina has one of the best state fairs in the country. In fact, it was ranked number 5 on social media this year. And then if you're looking for something a little bit more sweet, one of my other favorites was Cora and Mila's cookie dough on a stick. It's handcrafted cake batter cookie dough dipped in a birthday cake confetti coating. And then they also have a white chocolate cranberry cookie dough as well. So those were some of my favorites. There's more in the article. I will mention, if you're looking for a little bit of a healthier option, the Kale Me Shawarma from Neomandi Mediterranean is a little bit more of a healthier dish, kind of like a warm kale salad, if you're looking for something a little healthier, or if you're looking for more of a meal rather than a sweet snack or a savory snack. Brazilian Bowls has a pineapple bowl, which is quite good. It's a base of rice or guacho fries, and then it's topped with either chicken or steak, shrimp, black beans, corn, and then there's other toppings you can add to it, including their homemade sour cream. So I was able to try a sample of that one as well, and that is quite good as well. And then there's going to be several new exhibits and rides at the State Fair this year. So
Sure.
Two of the new rides are going to be a 210-foot giant slide, as well as a Candyland Adventure Funhouse. So those are the two new rides this year. In total, there's going to be 96 rides at the State Fair this year. And then a couple new exhibits coming to the fair this year. One is the Strolling Piano, which is making its debut this year at the State Fair. This is a motorized piano that moves around the fairgrounds during its performance. Fairgoers can walk along with this act, and the piano player takes requests and songs, and this piano plays a variety of different kinds of songs, anything from classic rock to Disney favorites. And this exhibit can be found near Gate 2 behind the Dorton Arena and near the Skygazer Ferris wheel. So those are going to be some of the new things at the fair this year. In addition, there is a new pumpkin carver this year, Jim Billy Creatives, who's based out of here in Raleigh. And then NC Distillers Association is bringing an exhibit for fairgoers 21 and older, where North Carolina made spirits and cocktails can be purchased near Gate 7. It is $15 a drink with a limit of 2 drinks per person. So those are going to be some of the new things at the fair this year.
Katie, mission accomplished in making everybody starving on this Friday morning as you went through that. You mentioned that you heard from some elected officials. We know that Steve Troxler takes the fair very seriously. What did he have to say at the media availability earlier this week?
Right. So Steve Troxler really talked about, why is the Department of Agriculture overseeing the fair? And it's really, to connect the community of North Carolina to agriculture and to expose them more to the agriculture industry. The agriculture industry is a $111.1 billion industry in North Carolina. And he said that this is the largest, brightest, flashiest platform to showcase this industry. He really wants people to know where their food is coming from and, be able to connect more with this industry that is such a huge part of North Carolina agriculture.
You can read more on Katie's story by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com. It's now 5:47, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. I'm a little hungry this morning, Boomer. He's got the latest in traffic. What's going on?
I think some food from the State Fair would be a great way to kick off your day, man. Load up.
WBT.
Your emergency situation station.
Huh?
It's 5:51 rather. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. We are also streaming live this morning on our Carolina Journal YouTube channel. Well, day 2 of early voting does kick off across the state today as early voting for the 2024 general election continues with lines at polling places yesterday. We have got some early voting statistics in this morning. This published to the State Board of Elections website no more than 20 minutes ago. Those stats show that more than 353,000 individuals voted across the state yesterday in all 100 counties. And here's the party breakdown from day 1 of early voting. 128,493 Democrats cast ballots yesterday. These are their party affiliation. This does not indicate who they necessarily voted for, just party breakdown. So 128,000 Democrats, 122,765 Republicans, and 101,139 unaffiliated voters. Now, in comparing that to what we saw in the 2020 general election on the first day of early voting, Democrats had a 78,000 vote advantage on Republicans after the first day of early voting. Looking at that in comparison to our numbers from yesterday, Republicans have squashed that gap to less than 6,000 votes in the first day of early voting. And as we talked about earlier this morning with Dallas Woodhouse from American Majority Action, there has been a big push on the Republican side of the aisle for early voting, and it would appear at least in the first day, and obviously we've got 16 more days of it, but in the first day of early voting, that early message and the plea and the call to get out and vote early obviously resonated with some of those voters. You can keep up to date. We are in the process of getting our website updated this morning at Carolina Elections. That's elections with an S, CarolinaElections.com. Taking a look at some other statewide news this morning. In the final stretch of the 2024 presidential race, North Carolina does remain as a top battleground state, as Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are virtually tied. That's according to details out of our brand new Carolina Journal poll that you heard yesterday morning right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Trump does lead Harris 47.2 to 46.6. That is very much within our poll's margin of error, and 4% of voters in that poll say they are still undecided on the presidential contest. This tight race mirrors the Real Clear Politics average for the state of North Carolina, which gives Donald Trump a slight lead, though other polls show him with larger leads in the state. Meanwhile, Democrat Attorney General Josh Stein has pulled ahead of Republican Mark Robinson in the gubernatorial race. The poll also highlights the close contests in the key Council of State races, including Attorney General and Lieutenant Governor. North Carolina does continue as a major battleground state. Nothing has changed there. Voter priorities include inflation, abortion, jobs, and the economy, with those topping the list. Natural disaster preparedness also emerged as a top concern. As you can imagine, that has come to light, particularly in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Speaking of Hurricane Helene and voting out in the western half of North Carolina, Dr. Andy Jackson with the John Locke Foundation will be making his way out to Yancey County this morning to take a look at what those election operations look like, as unfortunately, so many of those folks are trying to piece their lives back together as Helene 3 weeks ago today left a path of complete and total devastation and destruction for so many of our friends and residents out in western North Carolina. He will be on the ground in western North Carolina today looking at their early voting operations. He will join us exclusively coming up on a Monday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. A new study by researchers from Duke University highlights how variable ballot designs and party labeling patterns can mislead a significant portion of North Carolina voters. This is a very interesting story. The study analyzed public election data from 2004 until 2020 and found that about 13% of both Republican and Democrat voters unintentionally cast a ballot for a candidate in a judicial race that did not have a party label next to them. The example most used is the 2016 election in which Donald Trump handedly won the state of North Carolina. However, fellow Republican in Bob Edmonds lost a very key, important North Carolina Supreme Court race after being listed second without a party label behind Democrat Michael Morgan. The absence of party affiliation likely caused some voters not to know if they were voting for the Republican or Democrat. Back in 2017, the North Carolina General Assembly did pass a law to require partisan labels for all statewide judicial races. That's going to do it for a Friday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. We'll be tracking early voting stats throughout the weekend, plus the latest news on our website, carolinajournal.com. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. Have a great weekend. We're back Monday morning at 5 right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.